Hello everyone, welcome to a new video of Neil's train layout. Last updated video was back in January. What you see right now is where the Amtrak station is going to be. There's some tracks underneath there. We've got the station platforms in place for right now, and once we finish doing a few more control panels and a few other things, we can work on the buildings and structures, including this one. Got all the switches wired in on the layout. We had an operating session here a couple months ago and found that the original panels that were on the fascia of the train layout, some people leaned into them, and we had a couple of switches that got fried. So all of the panels on the layout will be recessed, as you see the Amtrak station and a few others. There's a couple panels left that need to be done. They'll be done within the next 60 days. Right here is the Reynolds Intermodal facility. This facility has 4 tracks, can hold a total of 24 well cars. You can see it's a lot of display in here, a lot of containers as well. On the opposite side of the peninsula, 2 tracks on the left will be for the Three Amigos warehouse. 2 tracks on the right will be for the chemical and tank facility. What you see here is the panel that operates that facility. In addition, it also controls the outbound track from the intermodal yard. So it can be controlled from 2 locations. Looking west on the north side of the wall, you can see in the back there is Shapeless Steelworks. Got a bunch of cars in there now. We had an operating session here yesterday. You can see some signals are on the layout. They're temporarily in place because we're going to attempt to do something a little unique and different because of the size of the layout, and that I like to do operating sessions. We're going to put some signals that will work off of both when the switches are thrown with relays and manual, meaning that if the switch is clear, you'll have a clear aspect signal. If a switch is thrown against it, it'll automatically be red, and you cannot override it with the manual controls that I'm going to put in place. And of course, if there's a diverging route, you'll be able to change the signal from a stop to an approach. A lot of the guys that operate on my layout will understand it, and a few others, it'll be just a warning to watch where you're going. Next here is C&P Restaurant Supply, 2 tracks in the back there. The building will be made once I get all the wiring and all the panels in place. Hopefully we'll start that toward the end of the year. You see here we're coming up, this is the last panel that has to be recessed. That'll be done once we work on the main control panel. The last session I had 2 months ago went very well. Had a lot of people in here. It got a little tight. A couple switches got fried because people were leaning against some of the panels, and it was real busy. So basically what I'm going to do with this panel here is cut it in half and move the top part of the panel over here to the left, which is going to be for West Harold interlocking, which is where you saw the signals earlier. And then the lower half of the panel, Little Jamaica, is going to be mounted right here. Both panels are going to be recessed, and they'll also have controls for the signal as well. On the main part of the layout, we're going to use Penzi style signals, 3 aspects on them, and since it's an East Coast type railroad, everybody agrees those are the best signals for me to use. I did have a lot of help. A good friend of mine here in Jersey, John, he's been a mentor, and he's made a lot of great suggestions and sound advice, and he helped me design the locations for these signals. Part of it is due to the way the framework is constructed. So while they can't be as close to the switches as possible, there's a long enough lead for a train to stop and then proceed depending on the signal. You can see more of the switches and the control panels were recessed. Coming up here on Freihoffer's Bakery, that was switched out yesterday. Got Markel paper in the corner. They switched that out as well. Had 4 operators here yesterday, not including myself because I was doing the dispatching. We had one guy that switched the auto racks. We had one gentleman that was working the intermodal train, and one guy worked the juice train, and the 4th guy, he actually took care of a friend of mine who was new to the layout and wanted to see how we do some operating sessions, and he basically worked the local yard, took out a train and switched all the industries that you see here along with the lumber yard in the corner and the steel works. If I'm not mistaken, he probably switched the warehouse in the corner there, and I'm sure because there's 5 cars there. Just finished the main freight yard here. This is Rockridge Freight Yard. Everybody that's been working the freight yard has enjoyed working it. It has 2 sets of ladders, and I'm just moving over here. You're going to see this building on the right here. That building will be removed. Originally, the plan was to put a maintenance track in there for freight cars and such near the yard. Best laid plans going to be changed. I'm taking it out. I'm going to move it to the lower level where the engine facility will be, and these 3 tracks here and the track by the building will now be 4 arrival departure tracks. Everybody thought that was a great idea because we've got a lot of freight here. There's 3 parts to this freight yard. We have a north arrival departure tracks, which controls which ladder you go on. From there, we move to the main panel, which controls every ladder track, both sides. It also controls the entrance and exits, so to speak, to the freight yard, so you don't have to go from panel to panel. The only time you'd have to move away from this panel is if a train was brought into the departure or arrival tracks, parked there, and you need to move it and bring the train into the ladders and then start breaking them down. That would be the only time you'd be able to, you'd need to do that. The good thing about it is if you're running a train coming from the industrial area and you need to go back out to the layout, you can run right through the freight yard, not bother someone who's on one ladder track, and just control it from the north arrival departure area panel, and the same thing with the south arrival departure panel. This panel also controls those 4 tracks I was discussing earlier. So this worked out real well. Everybody had a good time switching the layout yesterday and then working the yard. I didn't see anybody scratching their heads saying, how do I do this? I also gave them a cheat sheet so they could look up and see the picture of the way the freight yard works. Made it a little bit easier because not everybody comes here that often to operate. So a little help for everybody. Another picture of the yard. That's one of my private road engines. Atlantic Pacific Railroad is the name of my personal railroad. A gentleman named Oscar from a website from trainlife.com, who I know for a couple of years, painted these engines. He did 2 Jeeps, a few cabooses, and he's going to do some C30-7s for me. Hopefully I'll have them in the next 30 to 60 days. Swinging around to the other part of the layout, we come upon Cargill and Ribbenioff Electric Company, as well as Tropicana. This area was switched out. Looks like they took a lot of grain cars and tank cars out of here, which is good. Nobody switched the power company yesterday during the event, I guess because the coal cars were down below, and we only had a handful of operators. Again, you see the juice facility. A couple weeks ago, we switched out the older 57-foot reefers and put some of the new BLMA 64-foot Trinicool cars in there. And this area is always fun to switch and operate. Everything else was set up for staging. I had a number of trains set up on the stub tracks. There were 4 trains ready to go down here if something needed to go up to the freight yard. We stored the auto rack train down here, and down on the lower level on the main staging were 9 other sets of trains. So they were all ready to go. And everyone had a good time yesterday. Trains were run, and as some people say, profits were made for the railroad. All the customers on the railroad were happy. Everybody got serviced with supplies, and basically everybody had a fun time. So that's all for now. Hope you liked the tour. Next update probably be in about 60 days when I finish revising the main control panel and adding all the signals. Take care.